You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Welcome, everybody, to bonus episode number 3 of the DCAU Review. I'm your host, Cal, and with me is my good brother and my good friend, Liam. Number 3 bonus episode that we're debuting today of the DCAU Review. Only it has nothing to do with the DCAU or A at all. There's no animation here.
Yeah, this is the A could stand for Arrowverse, I guess.
Ooh, you see, this is why we're brothers, and this is why we do this podcast together.
Team effort here.
Love it. So it's the DC Arrowverse universe.
I mean, the U is kind of redundant in that sentence, I suppose. But hey, that is, if you can't figure out what we're talking about, we are in fact talking about, as you mentioned, this is our 3rd bonus episode, and so far, all of our bonus episodes have been us listing things. And
hey, they're popular. We like doing that.
Yeah, it's fun, and quite frankly, it's easy content. So we wanted to do, obviously, the big news. If you're listening to this, you're probably aware. The final 2 parts of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the giant 5-part CW superhero extravaganza, is airing this week on a Tuesday evening. And we thought it would be fun to do a bonus episode because we're not just fans of the DC animated universe. We're fans of pretty much everything related to DC Comics, including all of these various Arrowverse shows. Be that Arrow itself, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, Supergirl, Batwoman, Constantine, technically probably right. The animated things, all of them. So there's a lot of this Arrowverse has a lot of tentacles that reach out, and especially with this Crisis on Infinite Earths special that the first 3 parts aired in December, and like we said, the last 2 parts are coming up here. So we thought, what better time than now to give the listeners a taste of some of our favorite moments from the history of the Arrowverse.
There we go. Well, before we jump into that, just a brief stroll down memory lane as we'd like to just inject our own thoughts and feelings. I remember when they first announced that they were going to do an Arrow television show. This is right off the heels of Smallville ending. Of course, Liam, listeners probably know based on just minor comments here or there, or if they follow us at DCAU Review on Twitter, which is the page that you run for us. You're a big Smallville guy, and yes. The end of Smallville, the last couple seasons of Smallville, they did a lot of cool things. They really opened up the world. They had that old JSA crossover. They had. Mm-hmm. They sort of bent their own rule of no flights, no tights with Superman by the end of the series. But you even had the introduction of the Green Arrow as an ally in the sort of pseudo mini Justice League that was created for that version of Clark Kent. So when they announced this series that they were going to do a spinoff, or what I thought was going to be a spinoff, it's like, oh, they're going to do an Arrow, and then it cast somebody else as Arrow. It's not the dude from the soap operas that
right.
It's this guy named right. It's this guy Stephen Amell. Like, what? Who is this guy? What is it going to be? Right. And I mean, looking back now, Stephen Amell is the Green Arrow. He is Arrow. He is Oliver Queen, and he's not only is he that character, he's a good person and a cool guy overall. So it just a launching point from that, and of course, shortly thereafter, a couple seasons in, they introduced Barry Allen as sort of a backdoor pilot in one of the episodes of Arrow, and then launched The Flash shortly thereafter. And then after that, they launched, was it Legends, I guess, that came after that?
Yeah.
Legends was followed, and then Supergirl was on CBS, and there was speculation as to whether or not it would be tied into the whole Arrowverse. People started calling it the Arrowverse, so it had its own sort of unique name. And then there were rumblings that the Constantine show, after being canceled on NBC, they were going to bring him back. So they've really done an incredible job of creating their own mini for the small screen DC universe that really, as far as I'm concerned, Marvel certainly has dominated the box office and the big screen, but DC really owns the small screen when it comes to their heroes, and I've really appreciated watching their universe grow and see what they've had, and that's even with some restrictions, not even really having Batman and not really having Superman around a whole lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Early on, there was kind of a mandate of who they could and couldn't use. Even some of the characters that would show up on some of the early seasons of Arrows, they were kind of allowed to use them for a while, and then they were taken away from them later on, and then they were, it's kind of, I think a lot of that stuff is up in the air with. It's depending on what DC or Warner Brothers wants to do with their live action movies. That I think makes it hard for the TV. So that a lot of moving parts, a lot of characters who maybe would be cool or who would make sense to show up in a certain story, but who they're not allowed to use due to them being tied up in some other project. But I mean, talk about making the best, and then as we mentioned, as this giant crisis event, all of the various crossovers over the years that they've done between the shows, they've really created this incredible giant web of great shows and incredible characters.
And of course, if you're listening to this, you're probably well aware that this Crisis on Infinite Earths is also ends up being the series finale of Arrow. Like this is the final season of Arrow this year. So this is bringing to an end the original, the longest running of all of those shows. And, I'm sure that Stephen Amell will be back at some point in different various cameos, and we'll get into where he might pop up or show up. And I'm sure we'll know after this week if that is a possibility of him coming back and starring, but it's really an end of an era for that show in and of itself. So what better way to do that than with one of these lists to celebrate some of the top moments in this Arrowverse going forward. But before we get into the actual list, Liam, we were sitting together and just talking, trying to come up with some ideas, and we had so many we couldn't even squeeze all of them into a list of 10. So why don't we talk about some of the ones that didn't quite make the cut but were still worth mentioning?
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff, and some of these maybe don't qualify as a technical moment, but things like on Supergirl, they've really explored a lot of the Martian Manhunter, John Jones' past, and they've brought in characters to play his father, and Miss Martian appeared on the show. A lot of the different characters from his cast of characters got to show up, including one Martian played by Mr. Phil Lamar, and
which is super cool.
And in fact, Jean's father on the show is played by one Carl Lumbly, who might happen to be my favorite Martian. If you put a gun to my head.
You're my favorite Martian?
Yes, Carl Lumbly is my favorite Martian. I think I can say that safely. And so a lot. I really have loved that. I'm not as familiar with Supergirl as say Arrow or The Flash, but I have quite enjoyed watching them sort of explore the weirder side, some of the more interesting sides of that Martian Manhunter character.
And Supergirl from the episodes that I've seen, and again, I'm with you on that. I haven't seen a whole bunch of it. Certainly more of the Superman, of the Arrow and Flash episodes and Legends, but Supergirl mirrors the tone of the Flash a lot because it's a lighter character. She mirrors him very well in being a bright, optimistic. It's very Superman-esque. It's that optimism, eternal optimism that is, she's bright and sees the best in things and sees the best in people. And the cool thing about Supergirl, like you said, is because it was its own world within the multiverse, it really set up a lot of exploration for them to have fun. And at the when they started, they had a bigger budget being on a major network. So they had some other options to do some space stuff, and certainly bringing in characters like Martian Manhunter, Brainiac 5, and some of the other characters that they've been able to bring in, even now having Lex Luthor on there, and their own version of Superman has been really cool.
Absolutely. And some of the other mentions are characters that we maybe never thought we'd get to see on a live action anything, much less a television show. But characters like King Shark or Gorilla Grodd showing up on The Flash and being the central focus. They didn't hide away from them or try to change them to be like a guy who has the nickname King Shark, like might have happened if the show was on in the 90s.
Right.
It's just a big giant shark man and a gorilla with telepathy is some of the main villains that Barry Allen has fought over the seasons here on The Flash. They even did an episode last season where King Shark and Gorilla Grodd fought each other. So it's just wild to think about. Imagine telling your 10-year-old self or your 12-year-old self that one day you'll get to see a live action TV show where Gorilla Grodd and King Shark will fight each other and the Flash will be running around. It's awesome. it's one of the cool things.
And the thing about the introduction of those two characters especially is that they get that it's goofy. Like, these are characters that were created for comic books, not necessarily ever with a thought in mind that they would ever have a need or desire or an interest in having these as live action characters. So the fact that they're they took the ridiculousness of a gorilla that uses telepathy or a man shark and made it
right.
They poke fun at themselves a little bit in it, but it's not poking fun at the audience in a way that I feel that sometimes Marvel movies are guilty of. And I'm not here to crap on Marvel movies. I enjoy Marvel. I enjoy Marvel movies enough. But there's a certain point of where you can poke fun of and have fun with what's going on, where it doesn't insult the viewer for enjoying it. And I think there have been several times in various Marvel movies where it's almost insulting to the viewer. So whereas in these cases, these characters are maybe looked at with a little bit of a wink towards the audience, but at the end of the day, they're taken as serious threats and serious villains, and you're not made fun of for enjoying it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's really important. And some of those other great, cool things you mentioned, Cal, how we didn't really get to talk about Superman or Batman. Certainly, obviously, as you said, Superman eventually shows up in Supergirl in sort of a limited guest starring role. But when we first got a mention of Bruce Wayne back in the 6th season of Arrow, as a photo of Oliver Queen in the Green Arrow suit becomes sort of public domain, and it ends up on the internet, and Oliver's sort of trying to throw the scent off the trail. He happens to name drop Bruce Wayne and mention Gotham City for the first time in the Arrowverse. And sure enough, a couple years later, during the Elseworlds crossover, we in fact had the debut of Bruce Wayne's cousin and several of his rogues gallery and lots of references to Gotham. And now Batwoman has her own show on the CW. So getting to finally play with all of those Gotham characters, even though the Batman himself has not yet shown up. Well, not technically anyway.
Sure.
And it's still cool to have Gotham. It's the DC Comics world doesn't feel complete if there isn't some sort of representative from Gotham City when all these big crossovers come around.
Absolutely. And the very first time I remember the day after that episode premiered and just seeing how many people online, different articles, and people were so excited. They're like, oh my gosh, they said Bruce Wayne, like they were able to mention, and we sort of alluded to it, that there's all these sort of, shadowy rules that we're not sure about on what characters are allowed to be on TV at what time, because Warner Brothers doesn't like to mix their television properties with whatever they feel like it could be a movie property for some reason. But the fact that fans were given hope that this Arrowverse, which so much of the original couple seasons of Arrow involved characters or themes, or it seemed to be, the character of Oliver Queen was really based off of, hey, this is a Batman show. If we could do a Batman show, but we can't, so we're gonna do Arrow instead. A lot
of that first season, especially, is very Batman Begins-y. with the
Yep.
flashbacks, which obviously continued all the way through the 5th season of how he comes to be, who he is when we kind of meet him in present day, and all the trials and tribulations he went through to become the Arrow before we ever really met him is sort of expanded on. So yeah, there's always been a little bit of Batman in the DNA of certainly of Arrow and really of all the shows, I think.
Absolutely. Well, going from Batman, we talked about Batman. Now we already had one name drop for Smallville, and certainly that being the predecessor to Arrow here. But how extremely excited did you get? And remember, we got to keep this G as rated G as possible. Did you
Right.
get during last year's Elseworlds crossover when they flash to I guess it's Supergirl's world, and there's a farm, there's a familiar farm in Kansas with the wheat in the barn, and playing in the background is the theme song, Remy Zero's "Save Me" comes powering through. And of course, this is before there's been sort of any rumblings that there might be any actual participation from Tom Welling or any of the original Smallville cast in a crossover. But this is the first little hint that they kind of gave you that something might be in the can.
Yeah, this was it was an incredible moment because you kind of always have held out hopes, and once they started introducing the idea of alternate Earths, by this point in the series, we'd seen Earth 2, we'd seen Supergirl's Earth, we'd seen sort of different evil Earths or strange worlds. So we had to kind of assume, hey, somewhere out in this multiverse, Smallville has to exist somewhere. And that little tease, it was something, and they for Clark and Lois's, or for the Kent farm, they used the exact same farm that they used for Smallville for the Supergirl version of the Kent farm. So it was literally the same set or the same farm used on all those scenes in the barn and on location in Smallville. And it was such a cool moment, and it really made you think, oh, what if? And flash forward a year to the first 3 parts of Crisis on Infinite Earths, airing back in December of 2019. And not only did we get, it was a little bit more than a cameo, in fact, as we had Tom Welling and Erica Durance reprising their roles as Clark and Lois in a scene where Clark gets to sort of stand opposite the John Cryer Lex Luthor. Speaking of great cameos and things that we saw, we're a DCAU podcast. Kevin Conroy got to play Bruce Wayne in live action, which is
holy cow.
It's just one of those things where you thought you would never really see it, and oh man, wouldn't it be cool if that happened one day? And there's so much, there's fan art, and people are so talented. They're like, oh, what if he played an older, sort of broken down Bruce Wayne, kind of like he played in Batman Beyond? And they sort of took it in a different direction. Obviously, if you've seen the episodes, he's not quite the old man with the cane that we saw in Batman Beyond in the cartoon, but he is very much Kevin Conroy doing Batman in live action, and that is something I know we, especially as hosts of a DCAU podcast, will never forget. We also got some great cameos from the Titans show, from the short-lived live-action Birds of Prey series. Of course, John Wesley Shipp got to play not only the Jay Garrick Flash in the main Flash show, but he also got to reprise his role as his version of Barry Allen from the 1990s Flash series. So just so many great cameos and moments that
even
that
a Burt
out
Ward
of these.
cameo. Burt Ward
as
Dick Grayson, and as an old man.
Yes, it's just unbelievable. There's so many, and that was all in about all those rapid fire cameos and about the first 30 seconds of part 1 of Crisis on Infinite Earths. But yeah, what a treat all of those extra words, because again, you could have just made references to them. They had the reporter from the 1989 Michael Keaton Batman movie show up with that Danny Elfman theme accompanying it. Just so many great little touches that they added in where they didn't have to do that, but they clearly wanted to go the extra mile. And I think that speaks to Mark Guggenheim and Greg Berlanti and some of the creators behind the shows. That just shows how great of fans they are. it was one of the things where I think if they thought if we geek out about this, everybody else will geek out about it too. So let's really go the extra mile for this, and it definitely paid off.
I agree, and one of the hallmarks, I would say, we're talking about the fact that they do fan service so well, which is not only is it the fan service that they're able to do, which is really hard because fans' expectations sometimes are a bit unrealistic. Let's be honest. As fans, we can say that. But one of the things I feel like that they do really well is the drama of the series. And right just before we get into our list here, which is going to have some of those dramatic moments in it, there's a lot of dramatic moments early on in that first season of Arrow, including the death of his best friend Tommy Merlin. Which takes place, he's crushed under a building that in the Narrows that gets, that falls on top of him. And, it's
during an earthquake that was caused by Tommy's own father.
Right. So it's super messed up.
Right.
But, and that continues to sort of haunt Oliver throughout the next couple of seasons. And it's always a huge regret that he's had. But that drama piece that they're able to incorporate in there, that it is across every single series that they've come through with. There's drama that's happened in certainly a lot in the Flash series, especially early on in the first couple seasons. But it's not just fan service. It's not just fun, geeky moments there. They also have some real drama that's included in their programs too.
Absolutely. They take the source material seriously, and for as great and heroic and epic as, for the heroes to rise up, they have to be knocked down first. And they're very good at making those more serious moments matter.
Absolutely. All right, Liam, so what do you say we actually jump into our list here?
Sounds good. And we are kicking it off. Again, these aren't necessarily an official 10-1, but we're going to start with number 10 here. And number 10 will be, I think we made a brief mention of him earlier, but Constantine officially joining the Arrowverse is number 10 on our list in Arrow Season 4, Episode 5. As you mentioned, he had a short-lived show on NBC that was kind of hidden away on Friday nights, and I don't think a lot of people got to see it. Certainly didn't have a chance to become any sort of, get any traction. And I think everyone who did watch that show had the same thought, which is what a shame that we wasted Matt Ryan in this 11-episode thing that people are never going to remember, because what a great Constantine he was. Mm-hmm. And thank goodness, thank God that the Arrowverse existed and that they were able to bring Matt Ryan in as he debuted, as we mentioned, in a role where he saves Sarah Lance's immortal soul after they resurrect her body in the Lazarus pit. Just super comic booky plot. Yeah. And then from there, he would return several times and even become a regular cast member on Legends of Tomorrow in some of the later seasons. So from a sort of an unfairly canceled hidden diamond in the rough to being a major player in the universe, what a great thing it is that Matt Ryan's Constantine got to live on.
I agree. Yeah. And that's another one of those things that immediately after the Constantine show was announced, they were canceling it. And I what did you say? It was like 11 episodes or 12 episodes or something?
Something like that. Yeah.
It didn't even get to finish, from what I remember, its full season. And, and I watched a couple episodes of the Constantine show, and while it wasn't necessarily lore that I was a huge fan of, definitely not like a Constantine comic guy, it was entertaining enough where and certainly, the Constantine character is an interesting enough character itself that, yeah, he deserved. You're like, at that point, you hear it's being canceled. It's like, man, what if they bring him into the Arrowverse fold? And, there are these rumblings. Well, maybe, he's interested in it and coming in, but we don't know if his schedule is going to line up because now he's doing, stage plays someplace. And then they finally announced that he's going to have a cameo on the program. And when they announced they were able to finally get Matt Ryan in the fold and bring him on to be be Constantine. And then, like you said, having him come back in later seasons and be a full-time cast member. And I know he did some of the animated stuff for the CW app. Had his own little mini series. It's really cool that character, and certainly his version of that character, lived on well beyond the cancellation of that original show.
Absolutely. And moving on from here to number 9, this is kind of a double entry. We have a couple, I guess you can call them ties. But this one in particular, there are just 2 different moments that stood out to us from the very first episode of The Flash. The first is obviously Barry Allen. He's been struck by lightning. He's running faster than anyone ever has, and he's so excited. And then he runs into adversity, and he kind of has this falling out with this mysterious Dr. Wells, who is responsible for giving him and his powers in this strange particle accelerator explosion. And so Barry runs off to a familiar friend, to Star City, where he gets a pretty great pep talk from Oliver Queen.
Something tells me you didn't just run 600 miles to say hi to a friend.
All my life I've wanted to just do more, be more. And now I am. And the first chance I get to help someone, I screw up. What if Wells is right? What if I'm not a hero? What if I'm just some guy who was struck by lightning?
I don't think that bolt of lightning struck you, Barry. I think it chose you.
I'm just not sure I'm like you, Oliver. I don't know if I can be some vigilante.
You can be better. Because you can inspire people in a way that I never could. Watching over your city like a guardian angel, making a difference, saving people in a flash. Take your own advice. Wear a mask.
Yeah, it's if there's anybody that's going to give you a good pep talk, it's your best friend. And of course, the funny thing is Oliver sort of questions as to why he comes to him of all people. And the ironic thing, of course, is that Oliver says exactly what Barry needs to hear, because Barry has this idea that a hero, that he, with these powers, he has to be a hero like Oliver, a vigilante, somebody that's hiding in the shadows and is doing his deeds in secret. And Barry says, and Oliver tells Barry, no, you can be better. You can be better than me. And he tells him, he said, Barry's questioning if he's just a guy that got struck by lightning. And Oliver says, I don't think that lightning struck you. I think it chose you, which is such a good line. And then he goes on to tell him, he's like, you can be a guardian angel over your city. You can be, that light. And that's the contrast that's used so well. And especially for that Barry Allen version of that character, ever since they brought him back, in the comics, and he's this beacon of hope. He's this bright, eternal, optimistic light, and it contrasted so well with the Oliver Queen Arrow in this Arrowverse, who is constantly dark and brooding and very Batman-like in the way that he acts and sees the world, and constantly dealing with the heaviness of everything. And Barry deals with a lot of heaviness also, but has that eternal optimism. And it's great that Oliver, in this very first scene, before he even puts on the Flash costume and sort of gives him his name here, which is pretty awesome, he pulls out and points out, no, you're going to be different than me. You're not a vigilante. You're a beacon of hope. You're a bright light, a guardian angel over your city.
Yeah, it's really quite perfect. And that sort of leads to the end of the episode as Barry is chasing down his first supervillain, the original Weather Wizard. And of course, there's a giant tornado. What does the Flash do when there's a giant tornado? He's got to run around it. So, And in that moment, Dr. Wells, realizing that Barry still needs a little bit more help, a little bit more of a pep talk, tells him that he was wrong and that you are a hero. And he says words that will get repeated throughout nearly seemingly every episode for the rest of the Flash's run, and that is, of course, run, Barry, run.
Yep.
And it's that whole Flash pilot does such a great job of setting up who Barry Allen is, what his insecurities are, and why he feels this need to be the hero. And then in a moment where he most needs it, as you mentioned, his friend Oliver Queen, and then his sort of would-be mentor in Dr. Wells, give him the courage he needs, and he is in fact able to save the day. And again, brief
shout out to
Tom, off part.
Yeah, brief shout out to Tom Cavanaugh also.
Oh yeah.
Who is maybe you have some great stage actors that have played parts on The Flash, so it's hard to necessarily say that he's the best actor on that show, but he's really, really good. And especially in that first season as that dual character that, it's Harrison Wells. You're not sure what his motivation is. You know that there's something not on the up and up about him. And of course, later, revealed to be Eobard Thawne in disguise. But and he's gone on to play different incarnations of different multiverse versions of the Wells character. But he's a great actor, and I'm so glad that that they kept him on that show even after him being revealed as sort of like the bad guy.
Absolutely, he's just an incredible range, and he really set the tone for what the show would become. Moving on from here to number 8. We've had some, as we talked about, there's some serious, dramatic, heart-wrenching moments in the Arrowverse, and this is not one of those. This was one of the silliest, most fun things that have ever happened. There's this stuffed animal toy, sort of like a stand-in for a Tickle Me Elmo type thing in the Arrowverse known as Bebo, that was introduced in the 3rd season of Legends of Tomorrow. It's this toy. It ends up getting sucked through a time warp back in time, whereupon a certain amount of Vikings begin to worship it as a god, and hilarity ensues from there. But that all leads up to the finale of season 3, episode 18, where the legends are standing together. They're trying to basically band together and create a force of good magic that can fight this evil demon Malice. And wouldn't you know it, the image they pick for their champion of goodness is in fact a giant real life Bebo. And then we get a giant winged demon versus a giant stuffed animal, and they have a ridiculously awesome, silly fight in the middle of this field.
Yeah. If you were to try and explain to somebody what Legends of Tomorrow was all about, I think it would be very, very difficult, because it is such an off the wall show, and it's a show, again, if it took itself too seriously, if this was a show that took itself seriously, I don't think it would be very good. Just because it's goofy. It's a show about time travel, but they've taken that concept of, okay, well, where are they this week? Where is the team this week? What part of the world, what part of history and what part of the world are they going to be in this week? And instead of just being very formulaic, they have fun with it. They have a formula that works for them, because there is that sort of, okay, where are they? But they don't take themselves seriously. They rotate the cast in and out. You've had some of the same core members of that cast, but the fact that you have a giant stuffed, this is your season finale, mind you. And the season finale is having a giant stuffed animal, a giant Muppet battle, a giant CGI Muppet battle a giant CGI demon through various forms of magic is just incredible. And Brandon Routh is maybe my favorite person in the Arrowverse. I don't know. I have a lot of favorites, but the fact that this guy got a second life in the DC universe after really not getting a fair shake at playing Superman, you can tell he just has so much fun playing, Adam and Ray Palmer, and that honestly, this whole show, the great thing about it is you can just kind of pick any random episode to watch, and you don't really need to know much about what happened before or after, and you can just have fun with it.
Absolutely. And that's, as you said, if you were trying to just explain or show someone one thing to show you Legends in a nutshell, and the wackiness and silliness and fun that can be had, I think it's this Bebo versus Malice fight.
The best part is at the end where Bebo explodes and there's giant stuffing falling everywhere.
It's incredible. But
it's
moving
good.
on from there to number 7 on our list, and we mentioned some of the different crossovers and things that we've seen over the years, but as you mentioned, Cal, the first season of Supergirl was very much kind of kept to itself. It was on a different network at the time. It was on CBS. We weren't quite sure what was going on, if it was supposed to be in the same universe. Obviously, it had a lot of the same creative team behind it. But finally, we got our answer in Supergirl Season 1, Episode 18, when, in fact, the Flash appeared, coming through a portal from another dimension. And then he goes on to help Supergirl battle Livewire and the Silver Banshee throughout the episode. And just, again, having that confirmation and getting to see the Flash and Supergirl on screen together. They do a little bit of a race at one point, and just seeing those characters kind of cross over. It's such a big, important moment. And obviously, once Supergirl came to the CW, starting with the second season, she got to be a little bit more involved, and we got to see some great crossovers, including a musical episode between Supergirl and the Flash. But this is kind of where it all starts, and where we, again, got another taste of that multiverse, and that, in fact, these characters could, in fact, cross over, even across networks.
That, again, you're opening up the world. You have your two main shows on the CW, and then you have this third sort of unknown, like you said, same cast of creators and producers and directors, but you're not quite sure where it falls on the spectrum. And then you have this crossover, and I remember them hyping up the crossover, and we'll just talk about Melissa Benoist is the perfect casting for Supergirl. She plays that character extremely well. She's such, and we talked, I mentioned it before, just a very positive, happy person, and really brings that same spirit. Like, if you can't have a Superman show, which maybe we'll have one in the not too distant future, maybe we won't, we're not sure. But if you can't have a Superman show, then having a character that is based on Superman to bring that same idea of hope and positivity and light and everything that Superman, the S on the chest, sort of represents. That she does an incredible job of doing that. So this, bringing those fans of Arrow and Flash that maybe hadn't quite crossed over to enjoy Supergirl yet, or understand where she kind of falls in in the universe at large, having that an episode like that where you can explore that and are introduced to some of those characters and gives greater exposure, which is ironic since it's on a bigger network anyway, but giving it a more exposure, it kind of opened up the door also for when CBS decided they weren't going to continue with a show on their network, to CW to say, okay, well, we'll bring it over here. And, because we already know that we have this crossover appeal to the fans that are already there. And she's had quite a nice run since then.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's poised, assuming she survives the crisis, which I think there's a good chance she will, since her show is still going. It's cool to see her. They've done a lot of work to sort of establish her and Ruby Rose's Batwoman as kind of that, again, taking on that same sort of dynamic of the hopeful optimist, matched together with the sort of the darker realist of the group. So we certainly look forward to seeing all of those characters get to interact as we go forward from here. Moving on to something else that was quite incredible and maybe something we didn't ever think we'd see in right back in the first season of Legends of Tomorrow, season 1, episode 6. We saw Sarah, Ray, and some of the other legends travel to the future, where they not only met the new Green Arrow, that being Connor Hawke, who in this world was the son of John Diggle, Oliver Queen's right-hand man, but we also, in fact, get to meet an old man, Oliver Queen, who, much like his counterpart in the Dark Knight Returns graphic novel, happened to be missing an arm.
Yeah, this is another one of those fan service things that first of all, Connor Hawke as the Green Arrow, he had a short-lived run. I guess in the grand scheme of things, most people know and identify the Green Arrow as Oliver Queen. It's not like a Barry Allen versus Wally West or Hal Jordan versus Kyle Rayner type thing right. When it comes to what era you were born in or that was established. Connor Hawke really had a very short time in the grand scheme of things as Green Arrow, but having that character brought in and then sort of, I don't know, giving you a peek at the future without kind of explaining how they got there, and then giving you some of that, filling in some of the blanks later on with how John Diggle ended up with a son later on, is pretty cool. And having that tie in together, that be that character specifically. Of course, in the comics, Connor Hawke was Oliver's son, not so. And of course, there was a storyline that has gone on throughout the Arrow thread that he had a son with one of his ex-girlfriends, and you're always wondering, well, what is that going to be, Connor Hawke, or is he going to grow up to be Arrow at some point? But for them to kind of use John Diggle, who's such an important character in those. In a lot of those seasons, but specifically the first 2 seasons with Oliver working as his pseudo Alfred or his partner in figuring out what this Arrow or Dark Archer or whatever his character was at the time, right. The Green Hood, whatever his persona was, to have that tied into this character, and you see that future. And then on top of it, you have this holy nerd out moment of, holy crap, we're tying this into and giving you a little bit of a taste of the Dark Knight Returns. Just another geek out cool moment.
Absolutely, and the end of the episode being, Oliver with a robot arm confronting the son of Deathstroke in the middle of the city. Him and Connor and Sarah, and in fact, the rest of the legends sort of show up to save the day with the Atom and Rip Hunter and Firestorm and the Hawkman and Hawkgirl all showing up to kind of fight off this army of Deathstrokes, and the Green Arrow sort of ultimately. Both Green Arrows sort of ultimately get to triumph over, which at least at that point was his greatest foe, and that being Deathstroke, even though it wasn't the same one that we had met earlier in Arrow. It's just a really great moment, and it really, like you said, a lot of fan service, and also just a cool concept to get to see a little glimpse of a possible future for the Arrowverse.
Absolutely.
And moving on to number 5, we have another sort of double entry, and that is if we're going to the 3rd season of Arrow. So you mentioned a lot of Batman characters and elements were introduced into the Arrowverse, and none maybe more blatant than the big bad of season 3 being one Ra's al Ghul, who was in fact the leader of the League of Assassins, which had sort of been referenced in earlier seasons, and finally we get to meet Ra's al Ghul, and Oliver does what you do. You take off your shirt and you fight him with a sword, as is tradition when you fight Ra's al Ghul.
You should take pride. You survived longer than most. Don't be afraid, my son. Death comes for us all. We can only evade it so long.
And which obviously was a reference to the to the Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil, Batman and Ra's al Ghul comics from the 70s. But at the end of that fight, much to the surprise of, I think, you and I and probably everybody watching, Oliver loses that fight badly. He's stabbed through the stomach and pushed off of a mountain. And for all intents and purposes, and for several episodes going forward, it appears that Oliver Queen is dead.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was the mid-season finale,
Correct.
where they push him off the cliff. He gets stabbed. So you have several weeks, probably 6 weeks, maybe at least a month, if not 6 weeks, in between episodes from when they return. So you're sitting there wondering, holy cow, I just saw the star of the show get stabbed and pushed off a cliff. Like, how on earth is the show going to continue? Like, is this how they're going to end the series? Are they, is the series going to be built around Felicity and the other characters now at this point, or what's going to happen? But yeah, the shock, the way that ended, and, it built up so incredibly well to that mid-season finale, and the intensity and certainly the tension was there. And you're thinking that, all right, well, he has to beat Ra's al Ghul. Like, he has to. This has to be the end of Ra's al Ghul. But knowing that this is only the mid-season finale, so this can't be the end of the season overarching villain. Like, he's gonna the villain has to come back at some point. But for them to kind of pull that switcheroo of, nope, it's not that the villain gets defeated and comes back and then ultimately gets defeated again. And this looks like that the villain has completely not only bested our hero, he's killed him.
Yeah, absolutely. And that led through the first two episodes, season 3, episodes 10 and 11. Oliver Queen is in them very little. We sort of are aware that he's being tended to, that his wounds are being dressed by someone, but we don't really know who. Meanwhile, Roy Harper, Arsenal, and Laurel Lance, the Black Canary, are sort of trying desperately to hold the city, which has just gone crazy with the absence of the Green Arrow. And they finally sort of have this giant confrontation in the middle of a city street with Arsenal and Diggle and the Black Canary and Wildcat and a couple of the other incidental characters that have been introduced, Detective Lance, versus this character called Brick, who is sort of the gang leader who has taken over the Glades. And just when all hope seems lost, an emerald arrow shoots someone and saves Arsenal's life. And in fact, the Green Arrow returns, and it's a pretty great moment.
Yeah, I concur. It was a good return and a good way to bring the character back, and certainly led to quite an interesting wrap up for that season.
And speaking of some great moments, we mentioned that these series don't shy away from the tearjerkers, the heart-wrenching moments, and we've got a tie for number 4 on our list here, Cal. The first one being the death of Moira Queen in season 2, episode 20 of Arrow, playing off some of the flashbacks where Oliver's maybe one of his first true loves, Shadow, is murdered, where Oliver sort of makes a move to save Sarah Lance. And so the villain of the island, Dr. Ivo, kills Shadow, who was also loved by Slade Wilson. And so years later, as Slade is looking to just hurt and damage Oliver in the way he knows how, he asks Oliver to choose who he wants to kill, much like Ivo had done to Oliver years earlier, Oliver's sister Thea or his mom Moira. And Oliver really isn't able to decide, and Moira sort of steps forward and begs Slade not to harm her children. And in that moment, Slade puts a sword through her chest. And that was I mean, how much more dastardly can you get than killing somebody's mom?
In front of your 2 kids, no less.
Right.
Yeah. Put yourself in that position, like where your mom, and this was a character. It's thinking about it. It's like, this is a character, Moira, that was established, and you're like, well, they're not going to kill her because she's been a character that's been on the show for 2.5 seasons almost now.
She's one of the first characters we meet other than Oliver in the pilot.
oh, so maybe Oliver will just get out of it scot-free and he'll, fight off Deathstroke with his hands tied behind him. And that's not what happens. And, it really builds the drama and ups the stakes ultimately for the battle between Slade and Arrow that eventually came to a head later on in the season.
Absolutely. And as we mentioned, we have a tie at this number 4 position. And the other one, speaking of moms and of heart-wrenching moments, that goes to The Flash, Season 1, Episode 23, the Season 1 finale.
It's okay, you're okay.
Please. My husband, my son, are there?
They're okay. They're both safe. I promise.
Who are you?
I'm the Flash.
I don't understand. You look just like my father.
This won't make any sense. But it's me, Mom. It's Barry. You're Barry.
Oh, my beautiful boy.
I give it a second chance to come back here. To tell you that I'm okay. Dad and I are both okay. And we love you, Mom. I love you.
Goodbye, baby.
Barry has sort of all season long been working to find out who this man in the yellow suit is, this Reverse Flash that he knows killed his mother. It's revealed to be Thawne. Thawne sort of makes a deal with him where if he lets him escape, he'll give him the ability to travel back in time and save his own mother. And he goes back and he's about to change it. And again, this is where the show gets a little complicated, but another version of him from another timeline sort of waves him off and tells him not to do it. And so he doesn't save his mother, but before she passes, he sort of goes to her and removes his mask, and he has this moment where he tells her, I'm it's me, it's Barry, and I'm gonna be okay.
Man, I watched this one recently, just sort of as a refresher. And I mean, full disclosure, I'm an emotional guy. I'm not a guy that's afraid to shed a tear, and certainly not afraid to shed a tear at a TV show. But man, this scene, so good. Grant Justin, who plays the Flash, and may be handcuffed as far as acting range and stuff as the seasons go on, I would say. Maybe some of it has to do with content, and some of it has to do with storylines and the amount of characters that are on the show and all of that. But
Sure.
This first season, and this scene in particular is he acts incredibly well. It feels like he's actually talking to his mom. Totally believable and sucked me in. Had me a little bit of a lump in the throat. A little bit of ooh, this is really emotional. And the fact that you have this character that is forced to sit there, and he knows that he could do something right there to save his mom, to prevent this all from happening, but he lets it happen anyway. And then he goes in and interacts with her and has this moment with her to be able to say goodbye and to tell her that not only that he's okay, but his dad is okay too. man.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe one of the best scene. I mean, that's why we're listing it here in our top 5.
Yeah.
Best. I mean, again, we talked about maybe this isn't 10-1. This might
Right.
be number 1 right here as far as best. It's really good.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that any of these top 5, certainly, if not this whole top 10, any one of these could have been the number 1 moment. But moving on from there to our number 3 entry, and that is, it's tough. We've obviously already talked quite a bit about the various crossovers, all the cool characters that have been introduced, the different worlds that have been explored, but kind of all started, the first official crossover was in fact Flash season 1 episode 8, which was in fact called Flash versus Arrow. And this was a little bit before Batman v Superman came out, but it certainly seemed to have that same sort of vibe going for it. We have a villain that can manipulate emotions, that has really done a number on Barry's brain, and he feels angry and jealous, and Oliver is sort of tasked with, he doesn't necessarily think he can stop him, but he feels like he still has to try, and he still has to at least slow Barry down, quite literally and figuratively, long enough for Wells and Cisco to figure out some way to reverse the effects on him. And as we said, all of these crossovers are great, but this first one here, where we get to see Barry and Oliver kind of duke it out, and Oliver coming up with creative ways to sort of stay in the fight with this character that is, could theoretically kill him in the time it takes to blink, and coming up with a creative way to deal with that in a way that doesn't feel forced or silly was, I'm sure, not easy, but I think they pulled it off here. And like we said, this is the jumping off point for everything that would come afterwards.
Absolutely. And you always have those questions, the what ifs, whether you start out playing with your action figures as a child, and what if this superhero had to fight this superhero? And, it's a classic nerddom conversation of, if this hero went up against this hero, he would smash him. And like you said, in theory, it's not even a contest with somebody that moves faster than the speed of light to be able to find a way to kill you. But figuring out ways to make it a fair fight or an even fight between this normal everyday guy that just has some gadgets versus a guy that has super speed, gifted to him as a metahuman. It's, it sounds like a challenge, but you're right. They do it well. This is a fun. It's fun too. It's a fun episode.
Yes.
And a lot of fun having that first interaction. Like you said, it gives you a peek into what will be certainly the hallmark and some of the best episodes, and what would ultimately be the tentpole every single season is, okay, well, what are they going to do for the crossover this year? Because that there's going to be a crossover event, and they started out with this very small crossover, and then it's built to what we're experiencing this very week here, where you have multiple shows and you're including past and present DC TV shows and movies and universes all combined into one.
Absolutely. That's it's just a great jumping off point for that, and it's just a fun story. So it really checks all the boxes in that case. And moving on to number 2 here, it's another tie. Talk about some of the great climactic battle scenes that we've seen. That's kind of what we build to every season. Is sometimes there's a lot of talking. There's a lot of, if you're not as into the sappy stuff, you're also generally guaranteed that you're going to get 1 or 2 really epic, awesome superhero battles at the end of every season. And the 2 that really come to mind for us here at number 2, first would be the Arrow season 2 finale, season 2 episode 23, the Arrow versus Deathstroke fight. This is really, really well done, and it was a really great usage of the flashback thing that they use, as we mentioned, for those first few seasons of Arrow. As we have this, we have in real time, we see Arrow, the Green Arrow battling Deathstroke, who is taken this drug that makes him almost invulnerable. And so he's trying to inject him with the cure and then fight him, but he's also sort of struggling with whether or not he should kill Slade once he cures him. And that's sort of counteracted with this flashback where Slade, when he's first been injected with this crazy drug, is just mopping the floor with Oliver as they're in the sort of the bows of the sinking ship. And in the flashback, when they're on the island, Oliver makes the choice not to cure Slade and to in fact kill him, to drive an arrow right through his eye. And in the moment, in the present day, Oliver instead chooses not to do that again, not to try to kill him, but to instead inject him with the cure and arrest him. And it's sort of this big moment, and sort of what that whole second season of Arrow was building to, which is Oliver deciding not to just be a vigilante, not to just be an agent of revenge or anger anymore, but to in fact try to be a hero.
Yeah, it's the perfect, and it's, we talked about with one of our past moments that this is just 3 episodes after he witnesses Slade kill his mom with a sword in front of him. And that Arrow character in the first season was a character who killed people. He was a character who sought revenge and was a murderer. Like, he was a person that killed people. Yeah, they were all bad people. They were people that were doing terrible, awful things. But he was that Punisher type of character. He was that, that anti-hero. So the fact that we see the transformation, and this is, like we said, after this immediately horrifying event that he's witnessed, that he chooses not to do what he did before, not to be the person that he was in that first, 1.5 seasons, this dark character. The fact that he chooses to be the hero, and of course that's later reflected in the green that he adds to his costume and the brighter colors and the being more public in his persona as Green Arrow and all of that. So really, this is the jumping off point of that change, like you said, going from straight vigilante to more vigilante hero.
Absolutely. And the other entry that is tied with that great final fight is the fight from the second to last episode of season 1 of The Flash, season 1, episode 22, where we got not just the Flash versus the Reverse Flash. We got the Reverse Flash versus the Flash, Arrow, and Firestorm, the Ronnie Raymond version of Firestorm. All 3 of our heroes come together to have just an epic battle. We get, not only do we get the speedsters versus each other, but we get to see Firestorm in action. We get to see, again, Oliver Queen find a way to sort of neutralize Thawne's speed for a little bit, and they get to have kind of a hand-to-hand battle, and ultimately they do in fact win. And it's because Barry didn't try to go it alone. Instead, he called his friends, and that sort of makes the difference. And that was sort of the difference of why he could never stop this man in the yellow suit before. But he gets his friends on his side. They have a big, awesome fight. And in fact, they do manage to capture the Reverse Flash finally.
Yeah, two things just to point out from this moment. First of all, the real life moment of Robbie and Stephen Amell being able to be on the same screen, cousins that are both actors, get to be on the same screen at the same time in this penultimate episode of the Flash, where Robbie was probably his version of Firestorm probably was a little bit underused, I would say. I think the next iteration of Firestorm certainly got to shine more because he was on Legends of Tomorrow. But the fact that he gets to use his powers a little bit and certainly, for lack of a better term and pun intended, shine here as Firestorm is neat, just for knowing that these two guys are actually related in real life. But it also sets up, further down the line, that we're going to have these battles that include multiple heroes, and that the heroes are going to join together and they're going to stand together and fight, whether it's this or the later on in crossovers of Earth X, or all the way up through the Crisis on Infinite Earths that's happening this very week. So having that set up as a template that we're going to have these battles, and sometimes the hero is going to recognize that strength in numbers, and we're not afraid to bring in some these other cast of characters that we've created in this universe.
And it's also just like a little bit of logic, because there's generally like a moment, like once you've introduced, we've talked about the MCU a couple times, like once the first Avengers movie happened and then you're watching like Thor 2 and like, I don't know, a giant alien is destroying the world, whatever happens in that movie. And you're like, where's the Hulk? Where's Captain America right now? Where's Iron Man? And you're just like, well, this wasn't important enough. The world is only maybe going to end, so they didn't bother suiting up for this battle. Right. So just having him call on some of these other heroes that we know exist in this world, it made it work, and it made it feel, again, just a little bit more of that cohesive unit, and as well as being such a cool fight for all the reasons we mentioned. It's also, a little bit of logic can be appreciated in moments like that where they acknowledge that, it would make sense for Barry to call in the reserves there for that type of battle.
Agreed.
And that will bring us to our number one choice. Again, like we said, this isn't necessarily the real number one, but it's the last one we wanted to talk about.
Yep.
And it comes from, in fact, Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1, Jared, as we mentioned in December of 2019. It's sort of all come to this. We knew from the Elseworlds crossover on that Oliver Queen was not making out of this crisis alive. And he gave his life in a deal so that Supergirl and the Flash could live. We didn't quite know when he was going to die. We didn't quite know how he was going to die. But the Monitor sort of spells it out in plain English that he was going to be called on to give his life in this crisis. And so we know the death's coming, but certainly we're not expecting it in Part 1 of 5. And yet there's this incredible moment as these creatures are attacking Earth 38, Supergirl's Earth, and they're trying desperately, the heroes are trying to hold off these monsters in order to allow the planet to be evacuated so they could all sort of jump from their Earth to Earth 1. And all of the characters begin to be teleported away by the Monitor. Superman, Supergirl, Batwoman, the Atom, the Flash. And so it's just Oliver Queen standing there. And the Monitor tells him it's time.
The battle is lost. We must retreat and save our resources for battles yet to come. Has the planet been evacuated yet? Not entirely. Then it's not time.
And that to me, and it was one of those things, we weren't watching it together, but we were sort of sending messages back and forth to each other that night. And when that moment hits and Oliver Queen, faced with certain death, chooses that he would rather die saving more lives than save himself, it just so encapsulates to me the growth of that character, as we've talked about in a lot of these different parts, from where we see Oliver in the pilot, where he's this angry, vicious man who's breaking people's necks and shooting people in the heart with arrows, and all the way through to this Part 1 of Crisis on Infinite Earths, where he would rather die if it meant an extra few people could be saved than live to fight the villain. He chose saving the innocent over fighting the guilty, and it's this great, perfect moment that really encapsulates the journey that Oliver Queen went on all the way from Arrow Season 1, Episode 1 up to now.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that his response is delivered so great. This is his chance to be saved, to continue this fight. And the Monitor, even after the scene, his response is, then it's not time. If not everybody's been evacuated, then it's not time. I'm not going. That's how he responds. Ultimately, he's overwhelmed. He's killed. The Monitor leaves him there, and the Monitor even is sort of confused when he gets back with the other heroes and they're questioning him where Ollie is. And they're like, he's like, that's not when he was actually supposed to die. He's just baffled by it. But you're right. It is the perfect bookend to that character. And of course, we know Oliver has since popped up again. He's not, they tried to do the whole Lazarus Pit thing where they're going to, raise him. And it looks like he's instead taken on the mantle of the Spectre, which is, deep cut of comic nerddom right there. But it looks like he's taken on the mantle of the Spectre, and maybe who knows how many more times he'll pop up in the Crisis. He's on the poster, so we know that he'll be popping up at least a few more times as the Spectre, and who knows going forward what his future might be, and popping up in later portions of other series as the Spectre. But the fact that he was willing to sacrifice himself for people he didn't know. It's not even his Earth. Like, that's the funny thing. Like, it's not his Earth. He's on an alien Earth that he doesn't, it doesn't belong to him. And the fact that he was willing to stand there, like you said, fight for the innocent, to give himself up. How can you not appreciate that? Man, it's like, yep, that's a moment. That's really, really awesome. And you bookend it with this complete character shift. The character has grown. He's no longer this monster that he was in the first episode. He's completed it to the point where he is dying the ultimate hero's death.
Yeah, and as we see him sort of on his literal deathbed, and he gets to say goodbye to his daughter who's there, and he tells Barry and Kara, Supergirl, that they're the best of us, that they can continue the fight, because, again, going back to what he told Barry in the Flash pilot, that you are the very best of us, and you can inspire them, you can lead them, and you can keep fighting. And that not only does he give his life to save others, but in his death, he continues to inspire the other heroes around him to keep up the fight, to not give up. It's really perfect, and it's really a quite incredible way to end. As you mentioned, maybe not Stephen Amell's ending as a character in this universe, but the end of the Oliver Queen that we have all known and watched and enjoyed for the past 8 years.
Yeah. Heck of a way to end that character's run.
Absolutely. And we certainly didn't want to end this on a downer note, but I think we're seeing this as a celebration, as we said, of this entire universe. Obviously, it will continue in the final two parts of Crisis on Infinite Earths and beyond. As we mentioned, Flash and Supergirl and Batwoman and Legends are all continuing. There's sort of rumors and speculation about some potential pilots that might be coming for even more shows within this universe going forward, which we're certainly excited about if they come to fruition. But after all, Cal, it's called the Arrowverse. So,
that's right.
And we couldn't think of a better way to end this list than by paying tribute to the great journey that the character of Oliver Queen went on throughout all of these shows and the crossovers, all the way sort of culminating in that final moment.
Absolutely. Yep.
Again, it's one of those things where as sad as maybe we are to see Stephen Amell's Oliver Queen leave as a regular character, there's always that ray of sunshine coming through, that Black Lightning's still going strong. Batwoman has been renewed for a second season. Supergirl is just about to, or I believe has already filmed their 100th episode. So again, from a show that was seemingly going to be canceled after one season on CBS, to make it all the way 100 episodes is awesome.
Absolutely. All right, well, that will bring us to the end of this bonus episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And certainly, we would love to hear your feedback, not only on this episode. Let us know what you thought of the Crisis. Let us know what you thought about Oliver's sacrificial death. What moments did we miss on this list? Again, it's not a comprehensive list. It's just kind of things that moments. A lot of shows out there, obviously, in this Arrowverse. A lot of episodes across each and every series, so we've definitely missed some. Send some of your favorite moments to us. You can do so on Twitter. Liam runs our Twitter page, does an amazing job over there. That's at DCAU Review. Of course, you can also check out DCAUReview.com. That's where our new episodes every Saturday at
9 Central.
Yes, absolutely. Are posted. You can stream them there. You can also follow us or subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app, Apple, Google, and Spotify. All those podcast apps, go find it, subscribe to it, like it, leave us a review if that's an option. That helps us a lot as well. And then don't forget to tune in. Who knows what our next bonus episode will be about. We're excited to throw these out there every once in a while when these exciting events come along. So if you have some ideas for a bonus episode, shoot us a tweet and follow us on Instagram. We're at DCAU Review. We have some cool stuff that happens on there. We'll post some throwback Thursday episodes to past episodes and always post previews and clips of upcoming episodes.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to come back this Saturday for our regular episode where we're smack dab in the middle of January reviewing Batman Beyond, which is always a treat to review. So definitely come back for our regular episodes, and thanks for listening.
Well, that will do it for this episode. I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.
My name is Oliver Queen. After 5 years in hell, I returned home with only one goal: to save my city. But my old approach wasn't enough. I had to become someone else. I had to become something else. I had to become the Green Arrow.